Okay, hello, this is Derek Taylor for HIST 140, U.S. History 21877. This is a little preview of this week's modules. You have modules 5 and 6, which are on the American Revolution and the making of the Constitution. I should say Constitutions plural. We'll get to that in a second. But the next couple of weeks, you basically have two chapters in America, chapters 5 and 6, which deal with the breakdown between the British government and the American colonists in the 1760s, and then in the 1770s, the outbreak of rebellion and a war for independence, which obviously they won because that's where the course comes from, obviously. And then chapter 6 will give you how, after they won independence, how they began making constitutions, and it goes over, like I said, not just the what we think of the Constitution of 1787. But also first state constitutions, because we'll get to this, and I'll talk about this in a second. States formed their own constitutions first, but then the Articles of Confederation then was replaced by the Constitution. And then you have a couple chapters to go along with some major problems. You have your share there. Yeah. Let's see that. And chapters 4 and 5. Chapter 5 is the chapter on making constitutions. Gives you some stuff from the Articles of the Confederation. You can find that stuff whole in your textbooks. You don't have to look at that there, but gives you other documents that are contemporary with the making of these constitutions, and then the U.S. Constitution itself, and all the sort of considerations that they took into account and why they made that Constitution in 1790. And then you have I believe this is the one I gave you, Alfred Young's essay on the popular pressure on the framers in the Constitution. And then chapter 4 was on the Revolution itself. It gives you some of these. I believe the essay is on the Declaration of Independence in world history. So the influence of the Declaration of Independence worldwide. They actually give you in that chapter a comparison with the Venezuelan Declaration of Independence in 1810. In the early 1800s, you have a bunch of Spanish colonies declaring their independence and winning it from Spain. And some of them actually will model theirs on the American Declaration, and some other interesting stuff from the Stamp Act Congress of 1765, stuff from Tom Paine's Common Sense, if you've ever looked at that or read that, some other things as well. So that's those are the readings for this week. And just to give you a couple of pointers when we're talking about this, your textbook does a good job. I'm going to stop the share here. Textbook does a good job of laying out the causes and the things that happen. The big thing that happens is that Britain won the war, right? This war is not just a war in the colonies, it's a war in Europe. And Britain comes out on top, and that changes things. It changes things in two ways. One is that Britain is now, as I mentioned last time in the last video, it's now the power in Europe. So especially France, who was defeated by the British, are looking for ways to get back at them in terms of foreign policy. But more importantly to the colonists themselves, this has changed things. The biggest thing, of course, that's done is it's eliminated all its major rivals. It no longer the Spanish, for 20 years, Spain, Florida, the state of Florida is actually a British colony, but you didn't know that for 20 years. After 1763, when they win the 7 Years' War, the French are gone from Canada. What that means is, effectively, because before this, the colonists needed the protection of the British Empire from these other forces. If they're gone, not so much. The only thing they might possibly be defended against would be attacks from Native Americans. This is another problem. Because the Brits, and I'll talk about the Brits for a second, because you're wondering here, you probably have a good American sense of all this, and it seems very obvious that the Brits were just trying to, take freedom away from the colonists. Not that simple, because the British, let me step back for a second. I remember last time I think I talked about, you had this revolution in 1688 in Britain. It created this military power. It also created, after 1715, there had been a couple of different political parties the Whigs and the Tories. The Tories died out for a variety of reasons around 1715. So Britain's a one-party state from 1715 up to the 1780s. Why do I mention this? I mention this because the British government becomes very, very kind of not incompetent, but kind of corrupt, especially at the higher levels. During the 1760s and the run-up to the actual war for independence, there's a sort of rotating, like every 2 years, a new ministry comes into power. If you don't know how this works in the British Parliament, you have a ministry chosen by the king, someone to lead, who becomes the prime minister, to lead the government, right? The Parliament is not the government, it's drawn from the leadership of Parliament gets you into government as part of the king's cabinet. Even at this point, the king still has some power, but he's subordinate to Parliament. But my point is, during the years where you have this crisis going between the colonial leadership and the British government, there's not a lot of continuity because of that, because every couple of years they have a new ministry. So there's a lot of stuff going on. The guys, they suffer from a lack of competence, because it is a one-party state for so long, because the Whig Party, which is the one party, you don't have a lot of competition for anything. So there are a lot of brilliant people, by the way, in the British, even in Parliament, who, when the conflict with the colonies comes, they want to conciliate the colonies, but they're not in power. People like Adam Smith, the great economist, is a member of what's the Circle of the Marquis of Rockingham, who's a nobleman in the House of Lords, as part of his group. He's in the House of Commons. People like Edmund Burke, the philosopher, the political philosopher, gives a speech in favor of conciliation with the colonies, but he's outside of government too. So Britain's got its own problems. It has other problems besides political rot. It has, your technical goal of this, it has financial problems. Fighting a war is costly, and they need to pay for it. They spend a lot of money to win that 7 Years' War. And more than that, they have lots of problems besides the British colonists. They have to placate. They just took over Quebec, French-speaking population. So they have to do some things there politically. As you'll see in the chapter, one of the things that'll actually upset the colonists in 1774 is they passed the Quebec Act. What is the Quebec Act? The Quebec Act, basically, if you don't know, I mentioned the Revolution of 1688 had something to do with religion, sort of anti-Catholicism. Well, after Revolution of 1688, Catholics were basically second-class subjects. They couldn't hold public office. They couldn't vote. They couldn't own guns. That was a right only for Protestants. Those sorts of things. And so, but what happened was they took over this Catholic population in Quebec. The Brits had a problem. They ran everything. The French settlers who were there, the Quebec Act granted them a lot of these rights, and that spooked the colonists, especially in New England. Why? Because they had fought 2 wars early in the 17th and 18th centuries against the French in Canada. So this is a thing on the side there. But you also have, even more importantly, and the textbook definitely goes over this, the Brits won the 7 Years' War, not just with the help of the colonists, but with their Indian allies. And they signed treaty with these Indian allies, right, to safeguard their territory, their borders. Of course, that causes immediate tension because you have all these colonists who want to push west into their territory. So you have all these things coming together. So in short, the war just alters completely the situation politically. And in some way, people realize this, and otherwise they didn't. That's something that I keep in mind. Your textbook does a good job of showing you how, retrospectively, looking back at it, we can see the causes of this conflict, the American Revolution. But most people didn't see that actually in 1763. After the war was over, people were triumphant, right? If you're American colonists, hey, we're part of the biggest, baddest empire in the world now. We just helped the empire defeat their biggest rival, right? So we're like partners in the empire now, right? We deserve a bigger share of everything. That's what they probably thought, the colonial leadership, people who made the revolution. The Brits were like, nah, not really. The British tended to, again, the British had never really taken the colonists seriously. They've been busy in Europe, right? I think your textbook may have mentioned this, but if it doesn't, I'll let you know this. They did know, by the way, I mentioned this in my last video, they didn't know a lot about the colonists. They only had one body, the Commission for the Board of Trade and Plantations, that actually even knew anything about the colonies. They did know, by the way, the colonists hated taxes. That's why in 1765, when they tried to pass the Stamp Act to tax the colony, because they wanted to tax the colony. Why? To pay for, they have all this new territory. They've got to defend it with British troops. They're like, okay, you want to be part of the empire? You have to pay for it. And to give you an example, one of the reasons why they were so insistent upon this, the British, it's been calculated that by the 1760s, for every 1 cent in British taxes that people in the colonies paid, subjects in Britain paid 50 cents. So they're paying 50 times more in taxes in Britain than they were in the colonies. And they want, naturally, the British government wanted to take some of the burden off the people at home, them being a lot closer, obviously, and voting for them, all that stuff in parliamentary elections. But of course, the colonists did not see this at all. They freak out when they said this. You get this in the, won't go through all this in detail. My point is, they didn't really understand this had changed like this. And the Brits did not see them as equals. That's the other thing. The British government, they're run by, aristocrats. They look down their noses at these colonial, in their minds, they're these, people from the hinterlands. And in fact, as we know from subsequent, we know how things turned out. The people who ran the colonies, people who made the revolution, the Jeffersons, the Washingtons, the Adamses, were really capable people, almost uniquely capable people. But the Brits just didn't know that. They just didn't understand it. They did, as I mentioned before, go back to the stamp tax for a second. They knew they'd hate the tax. So to give you an idea of how suspicious, why there was such a disconnect between these two peoples, I had two groups of people, I should say. They weren't different peoples yet. The British Parliament passed a tax that was exceedingly low. It didn't tax them much, but the tax was so low, the actual stamp tax, that all it did was pay for its own collection. In other words, the tax didn't make any money. It's kind of pointless, right? Pass a tax, doesn't actually bring any revenue. But they did that, again, to placate the colonists. The colonists didn't see it that way. They're like, why would they do that? It must be because they're trying to take away our liberties. And I know you probably get this from, your high school study or from popular culture, that there was this conspiracy of the British to take away the liberties. There's no conspiracy. The British were just incompetent. Seriously, there was no, scholars have studied this. They're not trying to do anything. They just want money. But of course, taxation raises serious political questions, and that's what happens. That's what sets off a decade-long debate from 1763 up to 1773, which of course will turn into violence and then turn into revolution later on. And that's the other thing to think about is like, okay, how did it go from, because again, I can't stress this enough, up until the time the shooting starts, really, you have people in the colonies drinking toast to the king's health. How does that happen? It wasn't like everybody was on board with the revolution. They weren't. You'll see that in the textbook as well. What leads to that? It's interesting, fascinating thing. It could have gone another way. It really is interesting. Seems inevitable only in hindsight, right? So the other thing mentioned in your textbook, I'm glad they do this. They talk about making state constitutions, because this is the other thing I want to emphasize here is one of the criticisms that the American colonists had of the British government is that it was this distant authority. It was claiming this sort of, what's sometimes called unitary sovereignty of a consolidated state, meaning that there's only one sovereign, and what that sovereign says goes everywhere and can sort of, override local laws, which of course they'd pass with their own legislatures in America. And they proposed in its place in these debates they had, these pamphlet debates in the 1760s, that instead the empire, why not make it a confederation? Where the United States will have its own set of votes, and it'll have you'll have some stuff, and you can sort of equally share power. And the Brits are like, no, the law, parliamentary law runs everywhere, full stop, right? And I mention all this because these debates prefigure a lot of the debates that'll happen when you get to making the American Constitution, and even today we debate about the power of the federal government versus the power of the states, federalism, stuff like this. It's similar principles at stake here. And when the Americans declare independence, they declare the independence of these individual states. They're a confederation for the duration of the war. That's what the Articles of Confederation are about. They're not one single unitary sovereign state. Remember, they were rebelling against that. They're rebelling against having a single centralized sovereign tell them what to do all the time. And of course, they win the war. They're still under the Articles of Confederation. And in fact, the historian Gordon Wood wrote years ago that, for the first, how many years, 10 years or so, about 6, 7 years of the, from the end of like 1783 to the time 1787, things domestically were going fine in the United States under the Articles of Confederation. The economy was picking up, population was growing. No one was complaining about it that much. People that were complaining about it were the people who'd made the revolution in the first place, who didn't like where it was going. They're the ones who made the Constitution of 1787. And I say that because one of the things you should think about is why they need to do that. And I'll give you one very big reason. You can see it in the readings. Is one of the reasons is actually military. There are military reasons why they wanted to have, because I say this because the Articles of Confederation was what they've been demanding from the Brits, right? A confederation. There's not a powerful central government. Well, what the 1787 Constitution does is, of course, puts together a powerful centralized state. So, in some regards, of course, that kind of it goes against what they've been fighting for, but they needed it for certain purposes, which you'll see in the readings. Anyway, those are the two big things to think about. Just how, again, big events like this. Again, it was unforeseen. People did not foresee in 1763 having a rebellion against the colonial government. You've seen if you read the passage if you read about Ben Franklin, he liked being part of the British Empire. He enjoyed life in London, those sorts of things. And then later on, especially about state constitutions, because these are independent states. They're independent in their mind countries until they're not, until the people who made the revolution see the need to form a country out of them, form a single true nation state afterwards. So in any case, that's my preview and overview of the readings. Hopefully that was a little helpful for you guys. Nothing else for this week. If some of you have left comments or sent me emails, if you are just now getting the books, you better start and get cracking, because you only have a few more weeks left. The course isn't that long, so get started, get to work. Anyway, hope that helped you guys. Hopefully have a good great week. Take care and see you next time.